Think about the last really good nonfiction book you read. You probably spent, I don't know, hours on it, highlighting pages, nodding along to all these brilliant insights. Now, close your eyes and try to explain chapter 2 to me.
Yeah, you can't.
You completely can't.
Yeah.
It is just gone.
Yeah.
And whether you are trying to learn a new skill to get ahead at work, or you're sitting at the kitchen table trying to help a kid with their homework, or you just want to actually retain the information you read, you and I both fall into the exact same traps. Today, we're jumping into a deep dive on a curriculum that proves this memory lapse isn't a failure of your brain. It is a total failure in how you've been conditioned to learn.
It really is a fundamental paradigm shift. What we are exploring today is a framework called Empowered Homefront. It was designed originally for homeschooling parents, but the core of it is essentially cognitive science applied to the kitchen table.
Oh.
And when you look closely at their approach to learning, memory, and assessment, it reveals with stunning clarity that the traditional schooling model most of us grew up with is built on a very shaky foundation.
Welcome to today's deep dive. Our mission is to extract the absolute best nuggets of knowledge from this framework because it completely dismantles the rigid way we think about education. Let's start right at the foundation, like how we even define the word learning. We've been deeply conditioned to rely on a specific measuring stick, which is grades. We need that letter or that percentage to validate that we know something.
Yeah, but the fatal flaw with grades is that they primarily measure short-term memorization, not actual integrated learning. The curriculum uses a highly relatable scenario to illustrate this. Picture a learner studying multiplication facts. On Monday, they take a baseline practice quiz and get, say, 50%.
Okay.
Over the next 4 days, they just drill those same facts over and over. Friday arrives, they take the test, and they score 100%. The traditional system totally celebrates this. It stamps an A+ on the paper and declares the material learned.
But the curriculum argues the real test is what happens when you remove the drilling, right?
That is the crux of it. If you ask that same learner those identical multiplication questions 2 weeks later, totally unprompted, without any review, you get the actual truth. If they still score 100%, that data has moved into long-term memory. It's stuck.
Wow. And if it didn't?
Well, if their score drops back down to 20%, they didn't learn it. They merely held it in their working memory just long enough to pass the test on a Friday. That short-term hold is what the majority of traditional schooling is designed to measure and reward.
Okay, let's unpack this because this leads to an incredible framework Lori, the instructor, introduces called the 4 levels of skill. It completely rewired how I think about mastery.
It's a great framework.
It really is.
Yeah.
So level 1 is discover. You've just been exposed to a concept. Level 2 is learn. This is assisted performance, meaning you can get the right answer, but only with an open book or a teacher guiding you. Level 3 is execute, where you can do it independently and consistently. And the absolute pinnacle, level 4, is teach. You understand the concept so deeply that you can explain it to a total novice in your own words.
And what's fascinating here is the systemic bottleneck of the traditional classroom. When a teacher has 25 to 30 students in a room, the sheer mathematics of time prevent them from pushing every single child to level 4 mastery.
Right. There just aren't enough hours in the day.
Exactly. The system is therefore forced to test at level 2. Can you get the right answer with recent guidance and fresh repetition? If yes, you get a passing grade, and the entire class is forced to move on to the next topic.
Wait, if level 2 is just assisted performance, isn't traditional schooling basically just a massive exercise in training kids to be highly efficient at level 2 processing while giving them the grand illusion that they've reached level 4?
It is entirely an illusion of competence, and
Right.
breaking that illusion requires a totally different standard of proof. We equate getting the correct answer on a guided worksheet with mastery, but actual mastery doesn't look like a worksheet.
No, it doesn't.
Lori shares a perfect story about her 2 sons, Tyler and Jackson, that captures this. Jackson, the younger brother, was really struggling to grasp the concept of 5 times 5. Tyler, who was a bit older, didn't just rattle off the answer to his brother. He walked over, grabbed a whiteboard, drew 5 distinct groups of 5 dots, and walked Jackson through the fundamental mechanism of what multiplication actually does.
He didn't just give him the fish. He taught him how to fish.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And Jackson instantly understood it. Notice what's missing from that story, though.
A test.
Right. There was no Friday quiz. No test told their mother that Tyler understood multiplication. Watching Tyler successfully operate at level 4, translating abstract math into a visual lesson for a novice, was all the proof required to know he had mastered it.
Knowing that level 4 is the ultimate goal completely changes the stakes of making a mistake. In a traditional system, a wrong answer gets you an F, and that letter grade follows you around like a permanent stain on your record.
It's so punitive.
Yeah. But Lori's framework introduces the redemption principle. When you orient everything around progressing through those 4 levels, an F ceases to exist. There is only not yet. You haven't failed. You just haven't progressed from level 2 to level 3 yet.
It reframes learning from a rigid, punitive judgment into an ongoing, fluid progression.
But even if we completely remove grades and fully embrace this not yet mindset, we still have to look at what the learner is doing all day. Because if we aren't grading them, how do we know all those daily worksheets and assignments aren't just an illusion of productivity?
Ah, the busy work trap. It is incredibly easy to confuse compliance with cognitive development. Lori gives a vivid example of reading centers in a standard classroom. You have 30 kids rotating through various stations, sitting quietly, filling out worksheets, matching words.
Sounds like a teacher's dream, honestly.
Right. To an observer poking their head into the room, it looks like rigorous, highly structured learning. But the reality is that it's largely crowd control. The cognitive load on the students is incredibly low. They were just matching patterns to finish the paper. They are busy, but very little is actually being encoded into their long-term memory.
The root of this busy work trap comes down to a distinction that I found totally eye-opening. Topics versus skills.
Yes, this is huge.
Right. Math is a topic. Multiplication facts is a specific skill. Reading is a topic. Reading fluency or paragraph structure are skills. The rule is brutal, but necessary. If you cannot name the highly specific skill an assignment is building, that assignment is just busy work.
Identifying the busy work is step 1. The real challenge is what to do with it once you spot it.
Well, the curriculum actually provides a 60-second conversion formula to rescue these assignments. It's a 3-step process to turn passive busy work into active skill work. Step 1, name the specific skill. Step 2, push the task past level 2, meaning you take away the crutches, the study guides, and the open books. Step 3, add retrieval, which forces the brain to actively pull the information from memory.
Let's apply that formula to a classic, universally dreaded assignment. Copying vocabulary words. The instruction is usually, copy these 10 vocab words 10 times each. Your hand cramps up, you get bored, and the only skill you are actually building is penmanship.
Exactly. So applying the conversion formula, you change that exact same assignment to this. Use each word in an original sentence about your own life, and then teach the meaning of the word to someone else without looking at the definition.
The material hasn't changed at all, but the cognitive demand has skyrocketed. You are forcing the learner out of passive repetition and into level 4 execution.
Or take math. A classic busy work assignment is a worksheet with 100 math problems of the exact same type. So doing 100 math problems is like walking on a treadmill on autopilot. After the 10th problem, your brain completely checks out. You build speed, sure, but you stop building understanding.
Yeah, you just zone out.
Right. The converted version is more like an obstacle course for the brain. You tell the learner to do just 10 problems, but at 3 different difficulty levels, and then they have to explain the hardest one out loud. Why does this work? What happens if I change this number?
It demands active engagement. The brain actually has to sweat.
Okay, so you've successfully converted the assignment. The learner ran the cognitive obstacle course. They hit level 4, and you are thrilled. But what happens when you wake up 2 days later, ask them about the material, and they look at you with a completely blank stare? The brain just dumped it anyway.
Oh, it is the most frustrating experience for anyone trying to teach or learn. Lori shares a micro story about her son, Jackson, that captures this perfectly. He is working on his reading flashcards, and he is absolutely nailing them. Word by word, his execution is flawless. A minute later, they open an actual book, and he fails to recognize those exact same words in the context of a sentence.
Oh, man.
It's as if he has never seen them before in his life.
The natural reaction for anyone in that situation is pure panic. You think, we just did this. How could you forget?
And that panic leads to defaulting to terrible strategies. You assume you need to reteach the entire lesson from scratch, or print out 20 more worksheets, or just drill those flashcards 20 more times in that exact moment. Or worse, you just give up, skip it, and hope it magically clicks next month. Those reactions fail because they fundamentally misunderstand the biology of how memory operates.
Here's where it gets really interesting. The curriculum dives into the forgetting curve. Modern replication studies of this concept show that roughly half of what you learn fades within the first 24 hours. We always view forgetting as a failure of the student or a failure of the teacher. But if the research shows a massive biological 50% drop in 24 hours, forgetting isn't a bug in the system. It's a feature.
It is the brain's biological filter. Think about how much sensory data hits your brain every single day. If you remembered everything, you would be paralyzed. The brain naturally discards information. It categorizes as temporary noise to save energy.
Yes, clearing up hard drive space.
Exactly. This process is called synaptic pruning. It literally clears the pathways it doesn't think you will use again. To beat the forgetting curve, you have to convince the biological filter that this specific information is crucial for survival.
And you don't do that by cramming or drilling for 3 hours on a Tuesday. The real fix is spaced retrieval.
Yes. The mechanism behind spaced retrieval is vital to understand. You have to let a little bit of time pass, allow that synaptic pruning process to begin, and then suddenly force the brain to retrieve the information. When the brain struggles to recall a fading memory, that physical effort actually triggers the production of myelin.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it wraps around the neural pathway, thickening it and making the signal faster and stronger. The struggle is the signal that says, hey, keep this, we actually use it.
Practically, this looks so casual. Instead of a high-pressure Tuesday drilling session, you teach multiplication on Tuesday, let it rest on Wednesday, and then on Thursday morning at breakfast, you just casually ask, hey, random question, what's 7 times 8?
Right.
Or if you're working on reading comprehension, you close the book, wait 2 days, and ask them to explain the water cycle while you were driving to the grocery store.
Taking it out of the context of the textbook and forcing retrieval in a totally different environment cements it into long-term memory.
But if we are relying on these casual, spaced retrieval moments at breakfast or in the car, how do we ever formally assess if they actually learned the material? Because traditional pop quizzes usually trigger instant panic, which seems to defeat the purpose.
Well, we have to redefine assessment entirely. An assessment does not mean administering a test with a number grade. An assessment is simply answering one question. Can you use what you learned? Lori's framework outlines 3 highly effective, non-test methods for evaluating mastery.
The first one is the teach-back method. Instead of a multiple-choice quiz, you just ask, hey, can you teach me what you learned today? Pretend I don't know anything about it. It immediately pushes them to that level 4. The second is the week later check, which directly builds on the spaced retrieval we just talked about. You wait a full week and ask one casual question with 0 setup or warning.
And the third is the new situation test, and it is brilliant for measuring true integrated mastery. You take the concept they learn and ask them to connect it to a completely novel, real-world object or scenario.
Like what?
Well, if they learn about structural engineering from a book, you point to a bridge on the highway and ask how the weight is distributed. If they can apply the knowledge outside of the sterile context in which they learned it, they truly own that material.
But the curriculum is absolutely adamant about one crucial rule for any of these 3 methods to work: the judgment-free zone. The rule is listen, note, ask. You cannot correct their mistakes during a teach-back. If they explain a concept and get it backward, you cannot say close, but actually it's this. You have to say, interesting, what made you think that? Or what else do you remember?
Right, you have to stay neutral.
Okay, let me push back on this because it feels wrong. If I ask someone to explain a concept back to me and they see something completely factually wrong, isn't it my absolute responsibility as the guide to correct them right then and there so they don't internalize the bad information?
I totally get that. It feels incredibly counterintuitive not to intervene. But consider what happens psychologically the moment you interrupt to correct them. You instantly shatter the safety of the exercise. The learner realizes this isn't a casual conversation, it's a test in disguise.
Oh, their defenses go right up.
The defense mechanism kicks in immediately. They will stop being honest about how they are processing the information, and they will shift into survival mode, simply trying to guess what you want to hear to make the correction stop.
That makes so much sense.
Right. The mistakes they make during a teach-back are not emergencies that need immediate fixing. They are pure, unfiltered diagnostic data for you. They show you exactly where the cognitive gaps are, so you know precisely what needs a different approach the next day. If you correct them in the moment, you contaminate the data.
That is so tough to put into practice, having to just bite your tongue and take notes. But the logic is undeniable. Now, all of this assumes that the initial teaching somewhat landed. The methods are set, the spaced retrieval is happening, the judgment is gone. But what happens when you are trying to teach a new concept? You are explaining it as clearly as humanly possible, and you are just getting a total blank stare. It just isn't clicking.
This usually leads to what Lori calls the volume approach. When a learner isn't grasping a concept, the default instinct is to assume they just didn't hear it right. So the teacher repeats the exact same verbal explanation, just a little slower and a little louder.
Let me say the exact same words to you, just at a higher decibel.
Yeah, exactly. And when increasing the volume inevitably fails, we start to internalize false conclusions. The teacher thinks the learner isn't trying hard enough, or I'm a terrible teacher. They just aren't smart enough to get this.
It's a vicious cycle.
It is. The framework shares a very revealing story featuring two siblings, Kaylee and Tyler, that shatters those assumptions.
Yeah, same house, same teacher, but a totally different level of friction. Tyler, who had never been to traditional school, picked up new material with almost zero friction. But Kaylee, who had previously spent years in a traditional school environment, really struggled. She got frustrated, her mom got frustrated, and they were constantly clashing over basic math concepts.
It highlights a critical truth. The problem is rarely the learner's underlying intelligence. The friction Kaylee experienced wasn't an inability to learn. It was the delivery channel.
What do you mean?
Well, she was used to the rigid, single-channel delivery of a traditional classroom, and she had to unlearn that friction. The solution lies in dual coding theory. If you are only explaining something verbally and the learner is struggling, the signal is simply not landing. You have to change the channel.
So what does this all mean? If we are talking about delivery channels and changing how we present things based on the learner, how is that any different from the whole learning styles concept? You're just saying the whole I'm a visual learner or I'm an auditory learner thing is a total myth?
It is a complete myth. A massive, comprehensive study on learning styles completely debunked the matching hypothesis. The idea that a child has one specific ingrained learning style and that you must exclusively match your teaching to be purely visual or purely auditory has no basis in how the brain actually processes reality.
That is wild because that has been preached as gospel in corporate training in schools for decades.
I know. But if we connect this to the bigger picture of cognitive science, human brains don't store information in isolated sensory silos. They process reality as an interconnected, multisensory web. The mistake of the learning styles myth is trying to isolate and match just one style. The magic of actual cognitive retention happens when you use multiple delivery channels at the exact same time.
The pizza fraction example in the curriculum makes perfect sense of this. If you just verbally say a fraction is a part of a whole, the top is the numerator, the bottom is the denominator, their eyes glaze over, that's a single auditory channel.
Right, they're lost.
But if you get a real pizza, cut it into slices, visually count them out, let the learner physically hold a slice in their hand, and ask, if you eat 2 of the 8 slices, what fraction did you eat? Suddenly it clicks.
The mechanism there is crucial. You aren't just giving them a visual aid. By having them physically manipulate the pizza, you are engaging the motor cortex. The physical act of holding the slice anchors the abstract mathematical concept in physical reality. You've combined verbal, visual, and tactile channels simultaneously.
So they're all firing at once.
Yes. The more channels you use, the more neural pathways the brain has to hold on to the information.
It's not about finding their one secret learning style key. It's about kicking open as many sensory doors as possible so the information can get in and take root.
Which is exactly why the teach-back method is the gold standard. When a learner has to verbally explain a concept that you showed them visually, they are actively translating information across different neural channels. That translation process cements it permanently.
This has been such a massive reframing of how we process and retain information. We've gone on quite a journey today. We started by moving away from the crutch of traditional grades, realizing that true learning is about reaching level 4, the ability to teach. We learned how to spot the illusion of productivity and convert mindless busy work into active skill work.
Which is so important.
Completely. We embraced the biological filter of forgetting, using the struggle of spaced retrieval to thicken our neural pathways. We figured out how to assess true mastery without triggering anxiety by fiercely protecting the judgment-free zone. And finally, we dismantled the learning styles myth, replacing the volume approach with the power of a multisensory web.
It is an incredibly potent toolkit. While Empowered Homefront built this for parents teaching at the kitchen table, the cognitive science applies to human brains in every environment.
Which brings me to a final thought for you to chew on as you go about your day. Think about your own workplace or your own personal goals. How much of your daily professional life is just level 2 assisted performance or straight up busy work? Are you just checking boxes on a treadmill, confusing compliance with real growth? If the highest form of learning really is teaching, What is one concept in your career right now that you could teach to a colleague tomorrow to truly prove you've mastered it?
It's a fantastic challenge. Breaking out of the illusion of competence requires intentional, uncomfortable effort.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Remember, the next time you think you've learned something or you expect someone else to have learned something, ask yourself, did we actually build a skill or are we just really good at passing the Friday quiz? See you next time.